The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, hello. Can everybody hear me? Yes, I know you can. I'll ask the panelists to mute really quickly because y'all aren't muted, just so I can get through this PowerPoint and then we'll get through it. Tanika, I see you, but I don't think you're on a like a video device. And so I'll just have to unmute you once I get through this PowerPoint and then you can join that conversation. Or if you want to step off and then step back on and through like a laptop or a computer or something with the webcam, that would be great, but not necessary. Okay, so I want to thank everybody for coming. Appreciate you for taking time on this Thursday afternoon. I'm going to run through this intro really quickly, and then we're going to dive into this panel discussion. So today, panel is the second panel in Reproaction's movement building discussion panel series. We're talking about centering the most marginalized today. And I feel like that's very important in my movement building that I do for Reproaction. Our work is very centered on centering the most marginalized, leadership diversity, and coalition building. The first panel on leadership diversity is up, it's live, it's on Reproaction's website, and this is being recorded. It will also be up on Reproaction's website. And the next panel on coalition building is in 2 weeks, October 7th, same time. You can also sign up for that one if you have not already. And that one is going to have different panelists, and we're going to come back and have a fantastic conversation about coalition building. So, centering the most marginalized. Our agenda today is going to start out with a little bit of a welcome and an overview for what centering the most marginalized means, what that looks like, and then look at me clicking on things. Then we're going to get into panelist introductions, get into the discussion panel, which is going to be incredible, and then have some time for audience Q&A. The first panel did not go full time. I don't expect this one to either, unless we really get into a robust conversation, which I welcome. So hopefully y'all are paying attention, taking notes, or just thinking critically about some things that maybe you've been wanting to think through for a while or gain some clarity on, and have questions, because the panelists today are my experts on centering the most marginalized in their work. So a little bit of a background on Reproaction. Oh my God, I was skinny. I'm still skinny, but I was, whole little thing. We're working to increase access to abortion and advance reproductive justice. That's our mission. That is what we do. We're proud of our left flank analysis and are not in this fight to protect the past or maintain the status quo. Left flank meaning that we not only hold the opposition accountable, but also people who consider themselves, or organizations and groups who consider themselves as a part of the progressive movement or on the left, as opposed to being on the conservative right. We celebrate legal, accessible, and funded abortion as a great thing. We hold the right to parent and the right to raise children in safe and healthy communities as equally sacred in this struggle for dignity. We aim to increase the use of direct action in accomplishing our goals. And you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Our handles at Reproaction, one word. People like uppercasing the A, just one word, Reproaction, no dashes. So what does it mean to center the most marginalized, and why should we do it? I just have 2 points here, but we're going to really get into some things during this panel. I just wanted to set this up a little bit. So centering the most marginalized means that those most directly affected by a particular social issue, and 2 eyes, good one, Eva, plays key roles in leadership and organizing on campaigns and on projects in movement work. The premise is that those most directly affected possess a vantage point that uniquely positions them to understand the issue more comprehensively, and thus can generate more inclusive solutions, and also make sure that those solutions are being implemented fairly. So what all of that means, like I didn't really want to get into more than that because we're going to have that conversation. I just wanted to provide a little bit of a baseline for us to start from. So if you're like, oh, there's things missing here, I would have said this. It's okay, it's coming. All right. So I am your moderator this afternoon. My name is Ivania Woods. I'm the Senior Outreach Producer at Reproaction. I'm a Black feminist sociologist specializing in social inequalities, political economies, and movements. In reproductive justice spaces, I've primarily led and organized campaigns to increase birth control, abortion access, address maternal and infant mortality rates, and decriminalize HIV. I also discuss reproductive justice issues on Women's Issues, Women's Voices, which is a weekly feminist community radio show that airs Mondays at 7, 5, 7. I think it's at 7. It's been changed like 3 times within the last couple of weeks. I think right now we're at 7 p.m. But regardless, that's if you want to catch it live. If you want to catch it online, episodes stay up for 2 weeks, and you can catch those at kopn.org. Go to the show, Women's Issues, Women's Voices, the date, click on that. I discuss a book that is currently, I'm doing this book series where I'm discussing books every second Monday of every month, and you should check that out. So, yeah. Our first panelist I want to introduce today is the incredibly fabulous Laura Gully. She's the Director of Community Mobilization and Advocacy at Generate Health STL. So Mrs. Gully coordinates a community-led regional multi-sector health initiative striving to achieve zero racial disparities in infant mortality and maternal health. And Mrs. Gully has a strong commitment to her community, serving on the St. Louis County Housing Authority Board of Commissioners. She teaches as an adjunct faculty at Maryville University and at Washington University in the Brown School of Social Work, and coaches girls basketball, which I thought was extremely fascinating because I can see it. All right, so Zinga Hall is the manager of Youth and Source Leadership Programs at Sister Love down in Atlanta. Originally from St. Louis, Missouri, Zinga is an Atlanta transplant who recently completed her Master of Public Health degree at Morehouse School of Medicine. Congrats again. I probably give you that every time this comes up. With an emphasis in global health, health communications, and reproductive health. And Shireen Shakuri is the Deputy Director here at Reproaction. She is Iranian and Italian American, has a fire in her belly for reproductive justice work, largely driven by a commitment to affirming the leadership of Earth-colored people, with direct action and direct service as her favorite tools. This drive led her to building hard-hitting campaigns and managing special research projects at Reproaction before she was promoted to leadership in early 2021. Shireen is trained as an abortion doula and serves as a clinic escort at a local clinic. In her spare time, she is involved in various other DC activism projects, and she writes on issues of identity, feminism, and culture. You can follow her work in activism on Twitter at SheerMean. Tanika Sullivan is an HIV advocate and speaker, the newest member that I'm wrapping up into my fold here. Tanika is a member of BTNKC, which is a Black-led HIV and AIDS organization that operates under the Black AIDS Institute. Maybe that's changing soon, we don't know. She's also a peer educator at KC Care and became a Positive Women's Network Fellow in 2020. So Tanika is doing some really incredible things. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and get into this panel discussion. So what do y'all see? Panelists, y'all can see each other, right? I just want to make sure because the last video was just my screen the whole time. And then for Tanika, I'm just going to see if you made any. No? All right. So you are being unmuted. Hopefully you're ready for that. Tanika, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you guys hear and see me?
We can
Okay,
hear
great.
you, but we can't see you.
Um,
I don't know how you like signed in, but it won't even give me the
that better?
option to make you a presenter. But just so y'all can see her face again, um,
And
right?
I tried to, and
There's
I also tried to log in on my laptop, but it wasn't. I don't know what's going on or how. Yeah,
it's
but
okay. We
that's
can hear
okay.
you, and that works for me.
Okay, great.
So
And I can see you guys, so that works for me, and I can hear you. Mm-mm-mm.
fantastic. That's wonderful. All right. And so you see us, and you only see us. You don't see my screen anymore, right?
Nope, I don't see your screen anymore.
Okay, you're going to be our guide. Thank you so very much. So let's dive on into this discussion panel. I'm eager to get started. And look at that, be ahead of time. All right. So, yes. I want to throw this question to Laura first, but then I definitely want everybody else to chime in. So the first question that I want Laura to get into is like, how do you ensure that you center the most marginalized in your work?
I love that question. Really, to kick things off, that's an excellent question because, you know, it's the why we do this work. It is just to tell you a little bit about the work that I'm doing at Generate Health is we are looking at uh, improving the health of Black birthing people and babies in our region because they experience the burden of infant and maternal mortality. And as we've dug into the data pointed clearly who was experiencing the greatest loss. So that is where we turn and we start looking at zip codes that had high rates for some of the highest infant mortality, low birth weight, preterm birth, all of the things that we know contribute to or drive those mortality rates. And we start talking to people and we start having conversations about what they're experiencing and would they help us better understand the issues that they face, accessing care, living, playing, and their full existence. So not just a part of their life, but their full, bringing your fullness to helping us understand ways that we can make improvements. And so that is where we started. We started with listening, right? And we asked questions, what would it look like if? And it is really driven our why because they start identifying things that we wouldn't have came up with. The things that we would have started with would not have been anything that really touched the surface of where the root causes driving these issues. And that's where we started. So we started listening, and we're conveners. So we bring folks together from those that are most impacted to those that are making decisions about those that are impacted. And we create the conditions in which those conversations can happen. So I'll just stop there just to, allow other folks to weigh in. But that's where we start. And after a while, I do want to share a quick story with you as well. So I'll pause.
Right, I'm nosy. Tell me the story now. But if you want to wait, then we can wait. All right. So Shireen, you want to let us know how you ensure that you're centering the most marginalized in your work?
Yes. Okay, I'm unmuted now. Yeah, I think that in any work I do, I always try to step outside of myself, even if I am interfacing with or advocating for someone who shares the marginalized identities that I do. I know their experience just isn't necessarily the same as mine. And in some cases, they may not even view themselves as having an identity that has a level of marginalization. So it's, for me, always about approaching each scenario as one where I can learn from others' experiences and directly ask who they are, how they view themselves, and their needs, what they need from me, what they need from our work. And that's really the only way forward from there. For me, it's something that's come up a lot in abortion doula work. I think it's impossible to do that without just a wealth of empathy and the ability to meet people exactly where they are. Sometimes you can take people along the path of your political analysis with you and like kind of indoctrinate them into a reproductive justice mindset. But I've worked with plenty of people who are holding a lot of stigma or cultural and spiritual like weights on their shoulders that can be harmful to their journey. And so tapping into where they are and getting a sense of what they need in the moment is the only way I've actually been able to help get them to the next step, and hopefully we can walk together from there.
Yes. You on mute?
Sure.
There you go.
No, I just unmuted
Okay,
myself.
awesome.
I'm over here talking trash. Anyway, so it needed to be muted. So I was just like, okay, sure, I see you. Which y'all probably got from the body language. But yes, Zinga, how do you ensure that you're centering the most marginalized in your work?
Thanks so much for having me. I'm super excited to be on this panel with everyone. I too am an abortion doula here in Atlanta, so I saw that that we had that in common. So Nzinga, she, her, currently residing on occupied Cherokee Muskogee land here in Atlanta, Georgia. So I think about three things when I'm thinking about centering the most marginalized. I'm thinking of narrative, I'm thinking of resources, and I'm thinking of history. I'm thinking about when I think about people who are my comrades, people I'm in community with, what is the history of these people? Have they been historically disenfranchised? That directly relates to the narrative. Have the people who are in the most need, who need to be in the center, have control of their own narrative, or has that narrative been, shared, professed, explained by people who really have no idea what they're talking about, people who have even framed a false narrative? And then three, resources. Have resources been equitably distributed to the group of people that I'm working with? So whether that be healthcare, transportation, abortion access, nutritious food, eco-justice. Are people, have, fair housing, just getting into, the work of Ms. Gully here, right? So those are the things that I think about when I'm doing the work that I do, is making sure that I'm simply just an amplifier, using, the education that I have, using even the social networks that I have, right? I like to think of myself as a connector. Like, I try to bring person A, B, and C together to the space. So I try to keep those three things in mind: the narrative, the resources, and the history, to ensure that those who need to be the focal point have their voices be heard.
I like that. Narratives, history, and resources. Okay. Y'all just proving to me that I did good selecting y'all for this panel. So I appreciate y'all showing up and speaking all these good things. Tanika, if you want to come off mute, I mean, I can take you off mute, but I want you to be ready to be taken off mute.
Oh yeah, I got it.
Okay.
I got it. And thank
just
you,
share with
ladies.
us, yes, how do you ensure that you're centering the most marginalized in your work?
And again, thank you, ladies, for having me. It is definitely an honor to be amongst you ladies. But you ladies touched on a little bit of everything from my little notes that I had together. I think that I definitely try to be available to provide that listening. Like Laura said, that listening is very important. Because when you listen to people, you also find out that they do need that comfort. You find out a little bit of their history, that, and I don't want to mispronounce your name. It was How do you pronounce your name? No, where is it at? It ain't even on the screen.
Hello. Hi, my sister. I have a little
How
bit of
you
a
do,
cold, so
sister?
I'm off screen. My name's Nzinga.
Nzinga, I love that. I love that. I did not want to mess it up. Miss Nzinga, you touched on that history. And so that's providing that comfort to kind of get to know them and be available. And also support. That was the biggest one. Serene, yes. Meeting them where they are, that is important, you know, to provide, because that's giving them a level of comfort. Once you can get past that barrier, that comfort, you know, I think that makes it easier to accomplish, you know, things together, you know, especially, you know, when we're talking about the most marginalized, that's important. That has definitely helped me meeting meeting them where they are, provided any forms of communication, you know, because some people, you know, they build up a barrier where they don't want to communicate, especially meet in person for me, as in the work that I do as a peer educator. So that's, like I said, meeting them where they are, that's important. That's near and dear to my heart. I want them to feel comfortable with me so I can be able to provide this support. Yes. That's all. Look, it's short and sweet. It ain't too much.
Oh, I really love that. All of y'all, like this, it was just really comprehensive, really nice, very simple too, right? So hopefully, like people can grasp that and take that into the work that they are doing. Yeah. All right. So the next question, and I'm gonna have my good pal over here Nzinga jump us off on this one. So what are some things you want to make sure people who are either a part of and not a part of the group being centered to be mindful of when they are centering the most marginalized in their work? I want to take just a moment to slow down so that people in the audience can really grasp what I'm asking here, because y'all got the questions in advance, so you got to you got to read it. But I'm asking, what are some things you want to make sure people who are a part of the marginalized group and people who are not a part of the marginalized group, who are being centered, that they be mindful of? Because well, they'll get into the because through their responses, but I asked that question because it looks different, right? It has to look different. And people come with their own ideas and their own feelings about what their work should be and what it should look like. And sometimes you have to, you know, slow it up a little bit. So I want to know, what are y'all doing? But Nzinga, go ahead and start us out here. What are you doing? What does it look like when Nzinga's doing her fabulous work?
Thanks so much. And once again, I'm apologizing for turning my camera off. I'm like coughing while I turn it off. So thanks so much for you all's patience and grace. So not all movements are deeply rooted in reproductive justice. So that's the first and foremost, right? When we're thinking about especially Black women making executive decisions for themselves, we're talking about bodily autonomy. Oh, hey, Tanika. We're talking about bodily autonomy. We're talking about self-determination, the right to create our own families, to make sure that they have safe environments to exist. Because not all movements are centered in that, I think folks who are not in the movement may struggle with where we're trying to go. So that's first and foremost, being centered in reproductive justice. Also, just kind of like how this panel has allowed me patience and grace, I think patience and grace too is also needed in this movement, because some of us have certain skills and certain knowledge about the work that we're doing that others may just not be privy to. Some folks have that really deep, sort of background in like grassroots organizing. Some people are just, hey, I've been in development and fundraising for a really long time, but I really want to expand my skill set. And I think that's something that we just have to be mindful too. If, 1 or 2, 3 groups are coming together, just being open to the fact that we can create a space where everyone can genuinely share their knowledge, but we don't create shame or, fear without sharing this knowledge. Because even in the work that I came to, I was public health, this, that, and the third, college major, public health, went to grad school, public health, public health. But even coming into RJ, there was, certain skills that I needed to hone in on. And then I appreciate the patience and grace of all the organizations that I've worked for, including Sister Love, to really bring me in, to mentor me, to mold me, to get me to where I need to go. So I would say those two things.
All right, you're making good points. Extending grace, that's been my motto the last few months. Well, really, especially since the pandemic hit, but I realized that I was extending the grace to everybody but myself. Okay, so we're doing better at extending grace to myself in these scenarios. There's just a pull in this work to be perfect or to always know. I have to take that off myself. Like, there's no way to do that in any space. So, yes. Okay. So, Shireen, what are some things that you want to make sure people who are either a part of and not a part of the group being centered to be mindful of when they are centering the most marginalized in their work?
Yeah, I really like what Nzinga said about the extension of grace. And I think particularly in a movement like ours, which is so buttressed on volunteer labor and the expectation that majority women and trans and queer people are going to be doing that free labor because we are seeking our own liberation through it as well as that of our communities. It is so incredibly important to understand that, like, if someone is at the table with you, it is because, like, we are working to that same solution, and we just might not see the same path to it and through it. And yeah, that's definitely something I try to recenter myself with. Kind of like what I said before, I'd echo that. Someone shares an identity or shares like a parallel level of marginalized backgrounds, it does not necessarily mean that their experiences are alike and that they want the same solutions. Like, none of us working in this space are a monolith. Our movement is not monolithic, and it just butts up against all the very necessary conversations that we have had and will continue to have, even when we get to a far better place than we are now, around acknowledging and acting on intersectionality as the framework of what we do.
Okay. Tanika, what do you have for us? What are some points that you can share that you think people can latch onto that'll help them?
I would, well, I don't know, from my notes, and then what I answer from the question would be to recognize kind of the behaviors of being marginalized. I don't know if this was where it was supposed to be going with this question, but that's the kind of things that I have, because that is important to know the behaviors. And to me, I think that if you're not being marginalized, it's kind of hard to recognize those behaviors. So I think it's important for everybody, whether you're a part of or not a part of, to always be mindful of those behaviors and take those into consideration. Because it definitely helps. That it helps me. It's been a good pointer for me and that's kind of just sit back, observe, and and when it's the time, so you can observe those behaviors.
Okay, so I need you to be just a little bit more specific for me. So what are these?
Absolutely.
Like, what do you mean by behaviors?
And I think, and that's more like paying attention to what they say, especially in my line of work with the peer educators. So it's good for me to kind of horn in on what they're saying, because a lot of them can kind of, I don't know, maybe, how can I go with this? I'm sure they're part of or not part of. So I guess that's it. Just making sure that we are paying attention to what they're saying, because whether you're not affected by it or affected or part of it, people are still talking. The stigma in those who are affected. I believe that's where I'm going with this question. I'm sorry, guys. Look.
No. I think I can assume what you mean, but I just want you, I wanted you to put it in your own words.
Yeah,
Here's what I'm hearing. Okay, I'm
because
saying
that, because
okay,
uh-huh.
so because I know a little bit about what you do, so I can assume a little bit more than somebody who may not. But I'm thinking in terms of uh, the miscommunication that can happen with people who are marginalized and people who are not, right? And so you think about people in the dominant group when they see marginalized people doing certain things, for instance, they place judgments on those things or they misinterpret those things. So you could have
Yes, and
somebody.
also, yes, exactly, and also be willing to accept the correction. So yes, that's a lot that's on my notes. So
That part,
yes, thank you. Look, I am going in the right direction. I
yes.
was answering this
No,
right
that's
from
it.
my
That's it.
perspective. Yeah, so and that's also what I have for my pointers. Is it is important to pay attention to what is being said and also be willing to accept the correction. That right there, that part is definitely a big part. Thank you for bringing me on back with that. I appreciate
I'm
that.
just like, I just want clarification so people are like,
Absolutely.
I know they taking notes. They writing their questions. That's gonna be one. I can avoid that at the end. Okay, so
Thank you.
no, I appreciate that response. Very meaningful, and yeah, that is a real thing when people who are not used to working together, especially when you're centering the most marginalized and they're in leadership positions, and you're not used to working with
Mm-hmm.
them. May not be used to working with an indigenous person or a trans person.
Mm-hmm.
And like, what do you do in those circumstances?
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Appreciate that. Yeah, appreciate, like, leave room to be held accountable.
Yes, exactly. That
I
accountability.
where I was. Oh, I think Laura. We need your take, Laura. Give us the wisdom. Share your wisdom with us.
All I'm gonna do is just add to the expertise that is in this space right now. Just what you all have already elevated, I can't, can't take away from that. It is front and center to this work. I think the only thing I would add would be I had the opportunity to listen to, if you all have ever heard opportunity to listen to Brian Stevenson speak, really dynamic speaker. But one of the things that stuck with me, that resonated with me, that you all really kind of bubbled up for me was we can't do this work without getting proximate to people. And I was like, okay, what do you mean by that? Like, so what we were talking about, one of the things you raised, Tanika, about, understanding the behaviors, understanding the experiences. You don't have to see it to believe it's true, right? So trusting my lived experience is what it is. And that is my reality. Even though you may not understand it, you may not connect with it, it still is my experience. And if that's just one thing that I think about, how it may manifest or show up in the work, that you can help yourself better understand by getting proximate to people that you're working with, that you're serving, because it opens a window. It's kind of like if you think about doing home visits as opposed to, being in your office somewhere or in a setting that you don't get to see the full picture of who I am and what I bring to the table. So I really appreciate the conversation really being around understanding people in all of their fullness. Because you think about when you show up to either work or any kind of your girlfriends or whoever you may be engaging with, you don't just bring parts of yourself, right? You bring all of who you are to wherever you are. And we can't expect folks that we work with to do otherwise. So I'm just building on that notion of really truly understanding people's full experience and what that means.
I appreciate that. And that's like one of the core tenets of Black feminism, being able to show up as your full self. And I mean, I say Black feminism, intersectional feminism, third world feminism. Yeah, like being able to show up as your full self. And that works both ways, right? Like it works for marginalized people, and it also works for people from the dominant group. And in that sense, creating spaces where people feel comfortable showing up as their full selves, or have that ability. So, because I know a lot of people of color, we talk about code switching, and I'm not much of a code switcher. I'm like, hey, I want you to know that this is what you're getting, and that's what it's gonna be. It's just how I feel, or my mood at the time, and that's what it is. And I accept that other people are gonna do the same, and that we can still work together and do incredible things. But yeah, I do like your emphasis.
Can I add something on that?
I was just gonna say, like, real quick. So hashtag trust Black women, right? That's the hashtag. It's a popular one. But then we get into these spaces, reproductive justice spaces, and Tanika, just so that we're clear, you working on HIV. Nzinga also works on HIV, and like we see HIV as a reproductive justice issue. Are you here?
Yes.
But yeah, that whole hashtag, and like people will say it, or people, they love the motto, but then when it comes to actually doing that, they come up short. And it's like what you were saying, trust people's experience. Just because you haven't experienced it or you can't connect to it doesn't make it less true. You don't need to see or observe, or okay, there's no way you can know everybody's experience. There's, like, I am not a trans person. I'm not going to sit here and be telling a trans person what to feel and not to feel, or, what they have or have not been through. Like, that's bananas, or that their perspective isn't valued, because our situated knowledge is still knowledge, right? And it shouldn't be prioritized over scientific knowledge either, especially not in this work, because our position gives us the perspective to come up with solutions and how they should be implemented better than somebody at the top. We can see everything from the bottom. So, Laura, go ahead and expand on your point.
So I'm gonna play a little devil's advocate on the flip side.
The devil don't need no advocates. Don't do that.
Let me play another advocate. Give me another perspective on what we're talking about. I'm just elevating some of the expectations that may be somewhat unrealistic about marginalized people, to expect them to teach you their experience, or to expect people that that you expect them to show up some kind of way, and they may not, or they may not feel empowered to use their voice and advocate on their behalf. And so I'm just bringing that into the space, and I'm asking my fellow colleagues if you all have experiences about that and can weigh in.
Well, I'll start. I think that's kind of one of the questions. Can y'all hear me? I think that's one of the questions about the pushback and resistance, if I'm not mistaken. If I'm going too fast, but I think that's one of the
questions. We can skip around. Go ahead and get into it.
But yeah,
But yeah, that's the next question. I know it's not. Yeah, it is.
I mean, it's after it's one of them. But I mean, for me, having those uncomfortable conversations, those is what's important. That's how I handle that and that pushback and resistance, having those uncomfortable conversations. I mean, and keep at it. And you got to keep at it. That's just like something like if somebody tell you no, or this ain't gonna work. No, we gonna keep at it. We gonna keep coming up with solutions, cause maybe you see something and I can't see, and we both need to make it clear so we can see it, cause it can be beneficial. So yeah, have those uncomfortable conversations, that they actually help. they help because they can either, you can see everybody's point of view, because just like we mentioned before, not everybody, you know, is coming from the same place. Everybody's different. So definitely having those conversations. For me, it is.
Anybody else want to weigh in? I feel like I've been talking too much, so I'm gonna sit back. Absolutely. So for me, I've seen it. I've been, when I was younger, when I was a little newbie, I definitely made, I think back sometimes and I am ashamed of myself. But it comes with growth. So it's like the more it's like anything in doing movement work, the more practice you get at working with people across racial lines, sexes, sexualities, class lines, like the more practice you get, the better. Don't expect yourself to go in and know everything or know how to communicate or work with people, because as much as this movement work is about getting us outside of this box of white supremacy and classism and sexism, like we are in this box, right? We don't exist over and outside of society. We're just as susceptible to the messaging, and us doing this movement work is a part of us educating ourselves and learning more and learning how we can do better, right? And implementing what we've learned. And so I would just say from my experience, don't be so hard on yourself if you do go in, because I can remember a time where I was like, oh, I need to hear from white people. Why y'all not talking? I'm like, oh, that's so awful. Like, why? Why was that me though? And all my righteousness, okay? And awful, 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 awful. So a lot of it is, stepping up and stepping back, knowing when to talk, knowing when to not talk. I know when to not talk at that time, but you get better. Okay, you embarrass yourself enough times, you're gonna be quiet. Especially if you're committed to the work, right? And having those conversations, knowing when to apply pressure, when to step back. And sometimes for me, what I would say, what I have learned, is even when I'm in disagreement, I can be in full disagreement. I gotta focus to slow my heart rate down and calm down. But the tactic that I employ is asking questions. Because if somebody's talking crazy, you can just, okay, so are you saying this, right? Okay, so if you're saying that, then that means you think this, or like I'm trying to get to the bottom of like where this is coming from or something, and you make it take an inquisitive standpoint. Because ultimately they're gonna have to think more critically about the foolishness that they're saying, and you get to just get it that way. Now that takes patience that everybody doesn't have, but with practice you can do that. So does anybody want to add anything to that before we go on to the next question? All right. Okay, so the next question is, can you share some of the things that you do or say to break down misconceptions about what centering the most marginalized means? Because we hear this phrase, right? Centering, we need to center the most marginalized. We need to center the most marginalized. Like, okay, so what does that actually mean? And I've seen people interpret it in different ways, and that's why that's a question here. So I'm like super curious as to what y'all are gonna say. So I want to start out with Shireen.
There we go. Okay, I'm unmuted. Yeah, when you first mentioned this question, what came to my mind was people thinking that centering the most marginalized means like playing into a hierarchy of experience, or like oppression Olympics, as some people say, when really what we're aiming for is like building a more positive outlook for everyone, with the marginalized at the front. And I think that folks sometimes come into spaces thinking that they have to prove their hardship or compare themselves to others, when really it's about like acknowledging the harms and oppressions that have been felt, and especially what has been felt unequally, and working from the present onward rather than like dredging up someone's past or like the critique of whether or not they're like worthy of being centered. And so for me, a big part of that, like knowing that those are spaces that I've been in and sometimes played in, like that is where the extension of self-grace is really important. And like allowing others to feel that coming out from you, because like rather than thinking, God, I'm so ashamed, I was such a dope for like how I operated in certain spaces in the past, like think how lucky I am that I was able to grow over the hardship, how lucky I am to have been in the spaces where people were gentle with me, and like continue filling your own cup with that mindset, because it's just going to happen that you are going to deal with difficult things within your own marginalization and hearing others' hardships. But the way forward is letting yourself be fulfilled by those around you who are with this work.
Okay. And then let's go to Tanika. Can you share some of the things that you do or say to break down misconceptions about what centering the most marginalized means? You are muted.
There we go. Unmuted. For me, it is being engaged and getting the needed training, education that I need so that I'm able to address those misconceptions. Because I'm just beginning out. So the more education that I have, I'm able to address those misconceptions and be firm. Like, I got the knowledge behind it. So like you mentioned before, when you starting out and making those, those embarrassing moments, you have a lot of those. So definitely for me, that's how I kind of do the breakdown to meet those misconceptions. I think the more knowledge that I've had, I'm able to meet those. Yeah.
Appreciate you for pointing out the importance of education. I think people underestimate that. I've had people who are like, "Oh, I read a book, I read an article, I'm outraged." Like the education does not stop. It cannot stop. You have to keep educating yourself, because systems of oppression adapt and movements progress, and we all have blind spots, right?
And education is also workshops and engaging. I think I find that to be my most, meaningful training in education, because I am engaging with others. I'm, learning about other people, from everywhere, from all over. So, yeah.
Yeah, education can happen anywhere in any space. Okay, so in Zinga, can you share some of the things that you say or do to break down misconceptions about what centering the most marginalized means? And I'm so sorry you're not feeling good. I really appreciate you showing up despite that.
It's okay. It's okay. I'm always down to boot and rally. So piggyback off what my sister Tanika said, I think that's really important, that like continuous education, but also keeping that like not just with like knowledge about different subjects within reproductive health, rights, and justice, but also like brushing up on your skill set. So like, do you want to work on like budgeting? Do you want to work on being a better leader? Like all of those sort of things. Because sometimes I think some of the hard part is when we're doing this work is like, sometimes we're like at a standstill. It's just like, sometimes like as organizations, we're like waiting on certain decisions to be made by our judicial system. Sometimes we're like waiting on grants, like we're just like waiting, and we're just in like these standstills, and sometimes we feel hopeless. And so in those moments where I feel hopeless, like, okay, there's nothing that I can do, the grant's been submitted, like I've, done all my paperwork. In those moments like that, where I don't think that, I don't see something, I don't see, I'm just, uphill, uphill, uphill. I'm not seeing the descent, which is random because now I'm thinking of Six Flags St. Louis, and I was like, dang, I really want to ride the Screaming Eagle. Anyways, that was random, but like I'm thinking of my favorite roller coasters. I'm like, okay, we're going up the roller coaster. Like when is the fun part where we get to say wee, And I think those moments where you can like really center yourself, well, not center yourself, and I hope I'm, you're working with me, but being able to improve those skill sets. So during those moments where it's like, okay, there's nothing we can do, we're at a standstill, that like, okay, I'm working on other skills to ensure that when things are upcoming, I know there are ways that I can help my people, I can help my comrades. So yeah.
I really appreciate that as well. Because we do have those standstills and you feel like you're not getting anything accomplished. You're not moving forward, right? We wish we had more control over the direction and at the speed that we moved in progressive movements, but there's a lot. As we resist, they resist, right? Laura, wrap us up. I guess I'll wrap us up, but yeah, share your thoughts. And like, can you share some of the things that you say or do to break down misconceptions about what centering the most marginalized means?
I feel like I'm just saying the same thing. Listen, like,
well, say it again.
What people tell you. I think about the journey, because this is what this is. It's a journey that we're all on. Whether we're in, working in this space or we find ourselves in this space as a marginalized person. Like, so I was thinking about the journey that I've been on, and you all just like y'all instill some things that just bubble up. And one of the things, as you all were talking about education, was this growth mindset of, thinking that you know it all, or I know that I don't have to dig in, I don't have to keep learning. But we know we're lifetime learners. Like, you don't know everything about everything, so that means you got some growth to learn. And I think just approaching life in this way, I'm just like approaching the work in this way allows me to grow, because I'm learning about how the experience of someone is impacting not only their life, but my life and those that are around them. So it's always opportunities to grow. So when I think about the misconception is somebody that, I may feel like I'm a veteran in this space. I got it on lock. I know what I'm doing, that you still can learn and grow. And so you all just pricked my heart in that way, because it is when you think you know it all that you don't know shit. Nothing. I'm sorry to say that. You don't know nothing. And families, people that you work with will help you better understand how little you really know. But if you open yourself like a book and allow yourself to learn and grow and understand people in that context, man, how powerful you could be. So I'll pause with that.
No, I think that's for real. Yeah, so educating is a big part. Also, going back to what you said earlier about it's not, the marginalized person or historically marginalized person's duty to educate you. If you don't know, regardless, like for instance, a lot of that rhetoric comes in the direction of marginalized people to white people or white men. And I'm not necessarily going to educate another person of color either. You know what I'm saying? So like, it depends on my mood and where I'm at and how sincere I think you're being, what capacity I have at the moment, because this work is stressful. We do have to take care of ourselves and all of those things. So for me, when I think about misconceptions about what centering the most marginalized means, I'm thinking about people who think centering the most marginalized means that only those people get to speak. Only those people are leading the work, and that's not what it means, right? Like centering the most marginalized means that they are, and again, like back to that overview that I went over briefly, who is in that group of the people who are most directly affected by any given issue are the people who should be centered in that particular movement space, right? So we know in reproductive justice work, it's Indigenous, Black, and trans women, right? Maybe in, racial justice work, it's people of color, but I would even go to the extent of being like women of color. That includes trans women, right? And in every space, you want to be thinking about that. It depends on the issue. Like, for instance, with Tanika and Zinga working on HIV, and knowing that who y'all censoring? Go ahead, shout it out. Who y'all censoring in your HIV work? Black women, trans women, right? They're the most susceptible. They're the highest growing number of people contracting HIV. Like, you have to know a little bit of information about the issue to know who you should be censoring. That's where you start there, back to that education, right? But when you're thinking about how to censor those people, a lot of misconceptions come from people. I've been in spaces, especially racial justice spaces, where white people are like, well, I'm white, so I can't talk. It's not my place to talk. And I'm like, girl, stop. Right? Like, that's not what we're saying here at all. We're not saying don't speak. We're not saying leave everything up to us, right? We're saying make sure that you're sharing those spaces, sharing that leadership, that we're coming up with solutions and how to implement those solutions together, that we're working together, and that it's actually together and we're not being tokenized. Because that can also happen. It shouldn't be on our backs to fix, what we did not start. So, okay, we're going to dive back into that question that we kind of skipped a little bit. I don't know where we at. Okay, we're not gonna do that then. But if anybody wants to add to that question, how do you navigate movement spaces that do not center the most marginalized? And I'm gonna let y'all go in whatever order y'all want, if y'all have something to say, because we kind of got into this a little bit. Those sub questions being like, who do you tend to receive pushback and resistance from, and how do you work to get those people on board, or do you? So if anybody wants to speak to that, go ahead, and then we'll move on.
I'll start. I was thinking about all of the diverse disciplines that I work with in just in the maternal child health space. A lot of researchers, epidemiologists, physicians, academians, housing, I mean, there's a lot of different sectors that we encounter because the issues are so complex. And I think about what the expertise that they bring to the table. And I'm constantly reminded, and I love community teaching us these lessons. Sometimes they're hard and they hit you over the head, and sometimes you just have to get on board and understand what's happening. So I just have a quick story to share with you all. That I remember we were targeting a specific zip code in our region that had some high rates that they were high rates trending in the wrong direction for infant and maternal mortality. And we were doing outreach to understand, well, what are some of the needs that Black women and families have? And so in our infinite wisdom, because we were trained in this way, we're going to go do some door knocking and canvass the area. And before we do that, we got to know, okay, well, what we want to ask them. And so, I was going to tap into our epidemiologists and research team to come up with a short survey. And the community members was like, what you talking about survey? We don't want to take another survey. Please don't do no survey. I was like, well, what y'all got in mind then? What we gonna do? Well, what they came up with was nothing what I would have came up with, but it was so doggone innovative and creative. They created a game. You all remember the old school game show called Let's Make a Deal? It's old, it might date me, but that's all right. It's a game show, right? And you can earn money for doing certain things or having certain items. Well, what they decided to do was to imagine like those, like Monopoly money. You have $100. I give you $100. How are you going to spend it? Because that's going to tell you what's most important to people. And it floored me to know, because I was like, that's so not the way I would approach to understand. I'm going to ask you those technical questions. You know, where do you go when you need the services and supports? But no, it was just an innovative approach that was out of the box. They didn't get trained in how to survey folks anyway. So I love that, because if you really stop and just listen to what community, they can teach you stuff from a pod.
No, that's important, because we all have we have different educational backgrounds, different experiences, different skill sets that we employ. And so, yeah, when you are centering the most marginalized in the work, one pro of that is that you get those innovative ways to move about the work, which is so important and key to movement work, is that we stay innovative, right? For instance, I think when I used to work on economic justice, child, we used to march, okay? Rally. And I'm like, people been doing this for a long time. And then you see with Trayvon and Eric Garner, a lot of the protests when the racial justice came in, and then they were like, we're going to do die-ins. Now, who was doing die-ins before then? Nobody. So that's another innovative point, but that's because young people came in and was like, we're going to do something different. Now, we going to march with y'all, but we also you also have to be doing that leadership development, because when you're bringing in new people, they bringing in new ideas. And when you're allowing people who are most directly affected by an issue to take leadership, they're going to come in with that innovation. So I appreciate you sharing that story, Laura. Anybody else want to add anything to this question before we move on? All right. So next question is, what types of support and from whom would make centering the most marginalized easier in your work? Who wants to start? Laura. Go ahead and jump us off.
You know what? I was really giving this one some thought, because I was thinking out of the box funding. Like, we have a lot of constrictions on how we have to do certain things or who we answer to, because they have certain expectations of what success looks like. So having some flexibility with, best, because you're doing this work, on how to do the service or how to provide the care or whatever. So that, I'm thinking that is one way to have some flexibility. And then having committed allies. I'm thinking institutions that have access to money, people, and power, and with that commitment to share that with community that is impacted, and building in, I don't know why I call them this, but almost like accountability loops, where institutions partner with the folks that they're trying to benefit and serve. And elected officials actually elevate the things that community says are most important, as opposed to their own agenda. And okay, so I can go down this road, but what we're talking about is both partnership and pressure. Being in partnership with those, I don't say the dominant, but those that have access to power, people, money, what have you, partnering with, like, reimagining what things could look like with that kind of partnership with impacted communities. Wow, I mean, I envisioned that this could look a heck of a lot different, and the services and care and support could be on point and really meet people where they're at, because they're getting that accountability. I call it that accountability feedback loop that's telling you, you missed the mark, or yes, let's do more of this. So those are the things that kind of bubble up for me.
Yeah, I like that. Funding flexibility is the number one thing that comes to mind for me. Okay, Nzinga, what's going to help you do your work better or be more, what types of support would help you really be able to center the most marginalized more effectively?
I think if we can have open and honest conversations about mutual aid, I think that's something that's really important as well, because sometimes we can't wait for the grant. Sometimes we can't wait for the institutional funding. We need it cash apped immediately. Especially there was, I've lived in Atlanta for quite some time now, and I remember, being able to gather a group of folks who were willing to purchase pizzas for nurses who were serving for the pandemic, and we got it done within 2 to 3 hours. Like, we could have applied for funding, sure, like, yeah, okay, time's a ticking, or we could have said, hey, I would like to get as many pizzas as possible to the nurses working at Grady. I know somebody who's working there. Can we get this done? People were generous enough to give. Went to Domino's, picked up the pizzas, and I got it done within 2 to 3 hours. And moments like that, it's just like, that's what, to me, revolution is. It's just being able to address each other's immediate needs without shame, without harm, without, well, what about it's like, we need this done. Can you help? Great. Can you lead folks to immediate resources? Awesome. So having open conversations about mutual aid, normalizing mutual aid, and creating structures around mutual aid.
Yes, I love mutual aid. I don't participate beyond donating because that's too much human contact for me. I do donate to our local mutual aid. Tanika.
And just to piggyback, even abortion funds are mutual aid funds. Like, just to give people like a scope, like, that's mutual aid.
Can be. If they're doing practical support, or do you just mean like just paying for the abortions is mutual aid? Oh, I can see that. You're right. Okay, girl, I like it. Tanika, what types of support and from home would make centering the most marginalized easier in your work?
Yep, it's already been said that funding, the funding being number one, and also from who, that's the local, your local organizations. Y'all coming together, like she mentioned the story about the pieces. Who got time to wait for funding when we can come together and get it done? Because they already got their grant approved probably over there, your allies over there. So until then, cash at me this and we can get it done. And that's how we gonna work around that. So definitely the funding. Can I have that enough from that, and from who? The support of our local allies, our local organizations, because they're here, and then we can start branching out and getting the support of other organizations, and one big happy family.
Shireen.
Yeah, I think, funding, I won't even echo it. It's there. But something I've been thinking a lot about lately in some of the most pressing work we're doing at Reproaction and within our movement around education of self-managed abortion with pills. And I think very specifically linguistic support is something that movement-wide we need help on. Doing education work around this issue means that we have to get this information in the hands of everyone, but particularly those who need it in most dire straits. And Those are people who were marginalized at every turn in this country, undocumented immigrants and refugees. We know that people are getting pregnant attempting to cross the border. We know there's been state interventions that have blocked immigrants and refugees from seeking a variety of reproductive health services, including abortion and miscarriage management and prenatal care. But how do we get the wealth of information we have directly to those groups? It needs to be culturally competent, and language is the first step of that.
Yep, agreed. That's something that we're definitely lacking on. Movement wide, it's improved vastly since I first started like 10 years ago. Or you can go to bigger conferences, more like well-funded organizations, and they have translation available. So my addition to this, before we wrap this last question, we got 3 minutes, okay, is with funding comes this need not just to do the work, but to pay people for the work. I've made it a point to share a lot of job postings since the pandemic, and when I look at some of these jobs and what they're offering to pay, it's embarrassing. I'm like, this is why we don't have a lot of people who could be doing this work. They'll offer to go more corporate or choose to do something else when their passions lie here, and not, to do the work and I guess like create room in the budgets of organizations to pay the people that they want on their panels, to pay the people that they want showing up and speaking at their events adequately, right? Show them that this work is valuable, it's valued. We still live in a capitalist society as much as we want to dismantle it, and people got bills and things that they need to pay for. And if you are a marginalized person, then you're going to tend to need that money. Right? Like if you're showing up on a panel for free, then that means that that's time that you could be making money doing something else. And when you're contributing, oftentimes painful things that you've been through to discussions and conversations, it would be good to be compensated in that way. But also for people who are doing the work, because organizations that I thought were like big organizations that do good work, that have the notoriety, this is why they don't list, if you're looking at a job announcement, if they don't list the pay, don't apply. Take it from me. The pay ain't listed, it's for a reason. It's because they ain't paying, they know. So don't waste your time. So anywho, the last question is, what are some things that anyone can do regardless of their status in a space to ensure that the most marginalized are being centered? And that's just like our wrap-up question, because a lot of this, like all of us do this work, and we are within organizations doing this work. But what if, it's a volunteer or just someone who's there and they see some stuff happening, they're like, that don't look right, or anybody, I'm gonna let y'all choose which order you want to go in for this last one. Just like any advice or suggestions on what people can do who may not be in a leadership position in a movement space. What are any suggestions on what they could do?
I'm happy to open up. Something that I've started doing is not just to, if I get an ick factor from an event or a space or a group, like rather than just declining my participation like on principle, I will tie my participation to alleviating the situation, naming it first and then trying to alleviate it, whether it's like there aren't enough people of color at the decision-making level, whether there aren't enough people of other marginalized identities, queer people, what have you, making sure that my presence or absence is conditional on centering the folks who are the most marginalized, rather than I think what the knee-jerk reaction for a lot of people is like, I'm just going to take myself out of the equation, which sometimes if that situation is harmful for you, that is what you need to do. But if you can leverage the power you have and tie lifting other people up to your participation in space, I think that often does a lot more if you can like take on that burden.
I'll go. So 2 questions I like to ask. I'm not sure if you can hear my dog in the background. 2 questions that I like to ask are, I guess when I'm engaging in spaces, is A, do you have capacity for A, B, and C, right? Because we are dealing with, I'm so sorry about my dog. We're dealing with a lot. We're in the middle of a pandemic. People are facing housing evictions. There is a abortion ban in the South, right? We have so much going on. People have families and people are taking care of loved ones. So A, does the person have capacity, whether that be physical, mental, emotional? B are you asking questions? Is he like loud? Like, is he really loud?
It's okay.
A little bit. Sorry about that. Let me finish because he's just, he wants to be center of attention. B, I asked the person, are they making time for self-care? Because first and foremost, I want to make sure that they're in a situation where they can take care of themselves. And then C, sort of going back to what I was talking about earlier, is there anything that I can do to resolve any immediate needs? So can I share a Facebook post? Can I send an email? Can I connect with you on LinkedIn? Things of that nature. Even if it's not physically showing up, it's anything that I can do to help you to get to where you need to go, essentially. Yeah.
All right. Anyone else want to add anything before we wrap up here?
I'll go. Just to piggyback what everybody has said. Definitely have that, welcoming to where, that open. I kind of consider it the open door policy. So people can know to get involved, to be engaged by volunteering. Where it's needed. Definitely we need any and everybody, and like you said, regardless of the status, to come into to space. Just get involved, engage, and that's all. Add my little 2 cents.
I like that. Go ahead, Laura. You on mute.
Oh, can you hear me?
No.
Now, can you hear me? Mm-hmm. Okay. I don't know. I was doing the same thing. I was just going to say that there is a place for everybody at the table. In this work, whether you, however you self-identify, that there's a role. And, I think part of our role at the organization I work for, Generate Health, is creating this table where people can find their way in, regardless of where they sit. And especially if there is one of learning and one of, ensuring that we're not causing harm. But we also create space for those that are learning and don't have it all like figured out and together, but want to contribute, want to have a place in the work. And, maybe it's not well known where they fit in, but they have the willingness to be a part of the movement. We will find a space for you. and in a way, and I say that in a joking way, but in a way that doesn't cause harm, because that's not what we're in the business of doing either. Is while the table is set for everyone to be a part and join, because there's a place for allies, right? There is a space for you, and there is a space for those, I don't say that consider themselves woke. And the issues that we're working with and on are so complex. We don't have all of it figured out. Not one organization has all of the answers. So we need all of your best. Like the talent that's on this panel, I just learned so much, because it is when you bring folks together and have an opportunity to hear those stories and learn from what you're doing, it only emboldens and embraces me to learn and to take what you're doing. And Nzinga, I gotta say this before we get off, is I know you said you was from St. Louis. I was like, how's she gonna take her skills to Atlanta? And so we want you back, right? We gonna open our arms. We would love your skills and your talents back here in St. Louis. But the idea is that there is a big enough table in this work for everybody.
All right, so I know I said we do Q&A. If there are questions, put them in the chat. I'm going to give you a couple minutes to do that while I give my little wrap-up spiel. This discussion panel that I organized as a part of my role at Reproaction. You can, again, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at Reproaction. You can also check out our website, which is reproaction.org. We're working on several campaigns, including the one that Shireen mentioned on self-managed abortion with pills. We have our Stop Prosecuting Abortion campaign, our Maternal and Infant Mortality campaign, and so many more campaigns now. I feel like, Shireen, do you want to shout out like any other campaign? I know we have like our anti-abortion fake clinic campaign. I think those are like our main ones right now. We kind of fluctuate in and out of the others, but the work that everybody on this panel is doing is incredible. So I'm gonna give y'all the ability to, like, where can people find you, and where, and let them know like where they can find the organization, more information about your organizations. And I'm just going to call you in the order you're on my screen. So Laura, tell them about Generate Health.
Yeah, so Generate Health, you can find us. We're really simple, easy to find. Generate Health, STL.org. We do our work through initiatives. So you will see the website is really designed or broken down into initiative areas, almost like campaigns, right? And so we have coalitions within coalitions doing this work, because we know we can't do it by ourselves. And there's opportunities for areas that interest you to plug in and get involved. So hope you do so.
Yeah, thank you. Tanika, where can people find you? Oh, Laura, are you on social media anywhere where people, are you on Twitter?
I am, and not.
Okay.
if you go to our website, that's really the best way, because we're all listed and connected there, and you'll find us. You'll find us.
All right, Tanika, what organizations do you want to link people to? And let them know where they can find you as well, if you want to be found.
You can find me on Facebook, my first and last name. Also, working with B10 KC. You can email us. We do have email up and running. And you can also reach out to me as well. I'm the link to B10 KC. We offer resources, training materials. Also with KC Care, if anybody's looking to get involved, definitely you can just come down and and say that you want to volunteer. That's actually where I started from. I actually wanted to get involved with my community, didn't know where to start, and I've heard great things about KC Care. They have an array of things to do. So definitely, if you're interested in wanting to volunteer, come down, get involved. They're at 3515 Broadway. And yeah, just tell me you want to come volunteer.
In Kansas City. So they know
In
what that
Kansas
KC
City,
stands
Missouri.
for.
Yes, in Kansas City, Missouri. Yeah, not KC. Hey.
Right, not KC, okay. The ghetto. No. Think tell people like where they can find you and Sister Love.
Sure, you can follow us at Sister Love INC. That's on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. This is where we post all of our events, all of our programming that's coming up. So once again, that's at Sister Love Inc. So we look forward to seeing you all. Check us out on our website at which is www.sisterlove.org.
Thank y'all so much. So we got one question we're gonna try to get through in these 3 minutes before we exit. And the question is, they've seen a lot of organizations led by white folks in Louisiana claiming the mutual aid label when it looks more like traditional models of charity. In Zinga or anyone, can you speak more about what mutual aid means?
To me, mutual aid is providing resources in a manner that effectively can be sent to those who are most in need. This could be food, this could be cash, this could be like, I don't know, whatchamacallit, like a electrical outlet plug. Like sometimes mutual aid is like the idea of bartering, so quid pro quo, something for something. Personally, for me here in Atlanta, I'm in my neighborhood group. So there's been times where people are like, hey, I literally need some pillowcases. Instead of going to the store to buy them, does anyone have any leftovers? And someone's like, hey, I have extra pillowcases. Let me just give them to you, right? That's the way mutual aid can look like. Though I think mutual aid can be organized in a lot of, really great ways. I enjoy the fact that it is, for the most part, pretty unstructured. It's on this idea of trust. It's on this idea of camaraderie, this idea of family. So that's one thing I enjoy about it. And I hope that more people can adopt it more. I think it's seriously what is needed. It's being used in the revolution, and I just hope people can take it more seriously and use it when we truly need it. And there's nothing wrong with it. There's no shame in it.
Absolutely. Well, no time for anyone else to chime in, but that is it. I think the traditional charity model that they're referring to is just like giving to people and no one's giving back, because the mutual part of mutual aid is like you give and you get, right? But I'm with Inzing. It's whatever the community wants it to look like. It's pretty much what mutual aid is. And I know here in Columbia, when we do it here, it's like it can look like trainings, it can look like workshops, it can look like, planning ahead for disasters. We know that we get flooding, so we have a plan for like what happens if it floods, who's responsible for what, and what have you, and just things like that. So thanks for that question. And we're going to wrap this up and end this right on time at 3:30. So I want to thank all the panelists for showing up and showing out today. I appreciate all of y'all so much. Tanika, welcome into the fold. Appreciate you. And I don't know, how should we exit? Should we wave? Or should we just black out? Or should we just fade to black? All right, y'all. Everybody have a good rest of the week.
Yes.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you all so much. Thanks for having me.